The screaming started in the parking garage, sharp, desperate, cutting through the rumble of car engines like a siren nobody could turn off. Laura Chen pressed her back against her Honda, eyes closed, counting breaths the way the therapist had taught her. Around them, families streamed toward Madison Square Garden, excited voices bouncing off concrete walls. Nobody looked twice at the woman with the screaming child. Just another bad parent, just another kid throwing a tantrum. But this wasn't a tantrum. Her son Danny was 6 years old. He hadn't spoken a complete sentence since his 3rd birthday. Severe autism, the doctors had said, using words like spectrum and nonverbal and lifelong care needs. 3 years of therapy sessions, behavior specialists, dietary changes, weighted blankets, sensory tools. Nothing had broken through the invisible wall separating Danny from the rest of the world. Except music. When Michael Jackson's voice played through their kitchen speaker, something shifted. Danny would stop mid-meltdown, head tilting like he was listening to a frequency only he could detect. He'd hum along, not words, just pure melody, perfect pitch that made Laura's throat tighten every single time. Her sister had bought these concert tickets 6 months ago, insisting the drive into the city would be worth it. Laura had refused at first. Taking Danny anywhere crowded was rolling dice with disaster. But her sister had insisted. What if seeing Michael in person helps? What if the music he loves could somehow reach him? Laura had stopped believing in what-ifs 2 years ago. But here they were anyway, because what else was there to try? Danny's screams intensified, his small fists hammered against his own temples, a self-soothing behavior that left bruises. Laura tried to grab his hands, but touching made it worse. Always worse. A security guard approached, radio crackling at his hip. His expression said everything before his mouth opened. "Ma'am, if he can't settle down, I'm going to have to ask you to—" 10 minutes, Laura heard herself say. "Please, just give us 10 minutes." The guard's jaw tightened. Behind him, a couple hurried past, the woman whispering something about controlling your children. Laura had heard variations of that sentence in grocery stores, restaurants, birthday parties she'd been asked to leave. She'd stopped explaining. Autism meant nothing to strangers in 1997. Different just looked like difficult. The guard checked his watch. 10 minutes, then you're out. Laura nodded, throat too tight for words. They'd come all this way, spent money they didn't have, for nothing. Danny screamed louder. And then someone stopped walking. Laura didn't notice at first. She was too focused on Danny, whispering his name in the useless way you whisper to someone who can't hear you. But the air changed. The crowd's energy shifted. People slowed, turned, creating a pocket of space around them. A man stood 15 feet away, completely still in the river of moving bodies. Black jacket, fedora pulled low, watching. The security guard's posture transformed instantly, shoulders straightening, hand dropping from his radio. He took 3 steps backward without being asked. The man moved closer, not rushing, each step deliberate, careful. He stopped 10 feet from Danny and lowered himself to the concrete floor, legs crossed, sitting at the child's eye level. He didn't speak, didn't reach out, just sat there, waiting. Danny's screams began to thin, not stopping, but changing pitch, like an engine winding down. His fists slowed their rhythm against his temples. The man started humming. Low, steady, a melody Laura recognized but couldn't place in her shock. Not loud enough to compete with garage noise, but somehow cutting through everything else. Danny's hands stopped moving. His head turned, just slightly, toward the sound. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a single white glove, sequined, catching the fluorescent light overhead. He held it up, rotating it slowly so the sequins caught and scattered brightness like water. Danny's eyes locked on the movement. The man set the glove on the concrete between them and slid it forward with one finger, inch by careful inch, until it rested near Danny's knee. Then he stood, touched the brim of his fedora toward Laura, and walked away. No words, no explanation. Just gone, absorbed back into the crowd before Laura's brain could catch up with what her eyes had seen. Danny picked up the glove, His fingers traced the sequins. He stopped screaming. The silence felt impossible. Laura expected Danny to spiral again once they entered the arena. Too many lights, too much noise, bass vibrations rattling through the floor like earthquakes. But he didn't. He sat in his seat, glove clutched in both hands, eyes fixed on the empty stage. When the opening beat dropped and Michael Jackson appeared in a spotlight, Danny went completely still, not frozen in fear, focused, present in a way Laura had never witnessed. His lips started moving, not words, shapes, like he was trying to match sounds he heard to movements he could make. His fingers never stopped tracing those sequins, over and over, the texture grounding him while everything else overwhelmed his senses. During the fourth song, Danny began to rock. Not the distressed rocking Laura knew too well, but rhythmic, intentional, following the beat. She cried through the entire concert, not from sadness, but from something she'd forgotten how to feel. Possibility. After the show ended, Laura tried to find the man in the fedora. She asked ushers, security guards, venue staff, anyone who would listen. Most shrugged. One guard smiled knowingly and said, "He does that sometimes." But nobody would give her a name, a contact, a way to say, "Thank you for saving my son." She went home with more questions than answers. Danny carried the glove to bed that night, and the next night, and the night after that. For 8 days straight, he refused to let it go, taking it to therapy, to meals, even into the bathroom. On the 9th day, he set it carefully on his nightstand and hummed himself to sleep. The same melody the man had hummed in the parking garage. A melody Laura finally recognized, the opening notes to a song about healing. The envelope arrived 5 weeks later. Plain manila, no return address. Inside, a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. For the boy who needed quiet. May he find his voice. No signature, just a small sketch at the bottom, a single sequined glove drawn in black ink. Laura's hands shook as she read it 3 times, 4, 5. Who sends something like this? Who remembers a stranger's child weeks later, takes time to write, to follow up on a moment that lasted less than 5 minutes? Danny had started humming 3 days after the concert. Not words yet, but sustained melody. The same tune repeated like a mantra. 2 weeks after that, he said his first word in 3 years. Small, quiet, but unmistakable. More. He'd pointed at his cereal bowl. Laura had dropped the milk carton, white liquid spreading across the counter while she stood frozen, hardly breathing, waiting to see if she'd imagined it. More, Danny said again. 3 weeks later. Mama. She recorded it on her camcorder and played it back 42 times. The phone call came 4 months after the concert. A children's therapy center across the city. A spot had opened for Danny. Full scholarship, no waiting list, no explanation beyond. The funding comes from an anonymous donor who specifically requested your son. Laura asked for a name. The administrator paused. I'm not supposed to say. But the check came with a note. It said, "For the boy who needed quiet." The words knocked the air from Laura's lungs. She thanked the administrator, hung up, and sat in her car in the parking lot, crying so hard her ribs ached. Danny started music therapy the following week. Sessions built around rhythm, melody, emotional regulation through sound. The therapist was young, patient, trained in techniques Laura had never heard of. Within 2 months, Danny spoke his first complete sentence. I like this song. 5 months after that, he was singing, humming first, then adding words, simple lyrics, repetitive choruses, but singing, creating sound with purpose, with intention, with joy. The therapist said she'd never seen progress this rapid. Laura knew why. She kept the glove in a shadow box on her living room wall, and sometimes late at night she'd stand in front of it, trying to understand. How had he known? How had he seen Danny, really seen him, in a parking garage full of strangers? And why had he cared enough to follow through, months later, in ways she'd never asked for? Laura hadn't sent anyone that photo. The school had taken it 6 days ago. The winter concert had been open to families and local press, a small community celebration that the neighborhood paper had covered. Someone had been there in the audience, camera in hand, watching from the back row. On the back, the same handwriting. He found it. Nothing else. No explanation, no signature, no way to respond. Someone had been watching, quietly, from a distance, making sure the boy was okay, making sure the help had worked. Danny was 8 now. He spoke in full sentences, attended mainstream classes with an aide, had 2 friends who came over after school. He still carried the glove sometimes, tucked into his backpack like a talisman. When Laura asked why, he said it made him feel brave. Like someone's protecting me, he'd told her once. She hadn't known how to respond. She never told him about the notes. Maybe someday she would. Maybe someday he'd understand that kindness doesn't always announce itself, that some people help not for recognition, but because they see a need and fill it. That the most powerful gifts come without conditions, without fanfare, without expecting anything in return. Years later, when Laura saw the news about Michael Jackson's death, she sat down hard on her kitchen floor. Tributes poured in from around the world, musicians, dancers, millions of fans. She recognized the fedora in archive footage, the same careful posture, the same quiet intensity. It had been him, the man who'd helped millions through music, had stopped in a parking garage for one silent boy nobody else could reach. She pulled the shadow box off the wall and held it in her lap. Danny, now 20, walked into the kitchen and sat beside her. He didn't ask why she was crying. He just leaned against her shoulder and hummed, softly, steadily. The same melody he'd heard that night in the garage, the melody that had given him permission to find his voice. Some debts can never be repaid. Some kindness leaves no room for acknowledgement. You just hold it close, let it change you, and pass it forward when your moment comes. Danny had found his voice, and somewhere, in the quiet, someone had been listening all along. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Your support helps us share more incredible moments of unexpected compassion. Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that changed everything? Tell us in the comments below. What do you think? Was it instinct, or did Michael Jackson simply understand what others couldn't see? Share your thoughts. We read every single comment.